And we are live. My name is JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser. Today, as you can see, I'm joined with my co-host Payman Ascari, and Mr. Daniel Tyree from the Dominion Society was gracious enough to come and join us and speak about his organization. So, with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Daniel to explain his organization to you guys.
The pleasure's all mine, guys. Thanks for having me on. As you said, I'm Daniel Tyree. I'm the chairman and founder of the Dominion Society. We're a new not-for-profit organization in Canada that promotes Canadian identity, nationalism, and a focus on immigration reform, specifically the concept of remigration. So our main concept is that Canada is more than just a post-national economic zone, and Canadians are more than just interchangeable economic units. We're a nation by the strict definition, which is where we are a people, a distinct people with a unique identity, heritage, and culture. And we believe that needs to be actively preserved through our immigration process. And especially over the last decade, but over the last few, that ethnocultural identity has been consistently eroded by mass immigration policies that has transformed Canada's demographics and brought over people that have no connection to our nation or our heritage. So in order to preserve that at this point, the only way to do so is through this idea of remigration. So that's our main idea. We really push this forward. We're trying to push it into the zeitgeist, and I think we've been pretty successful in doing so in just the last 5 months since we launched the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't hear the word until you guys started putting it out there. I mean, I've been advocating against the mass migration into Canada for a few years now, and I never heard that. Now I have to ask you, Daniel, did you guys come up with that word yourselves?
No. So this concept was kind of created in actually French politics through the New Right, the Nouvelle Droite. Which kind of started emerging after 2016, after the Trump kind of takeoff. And it's been popularized by an Austrian activist named Martin Sellner. So we didn't come up with the idea. We're kind of adopting it and bringing it into Canadian politics. It's something that's kind of taking off across the Western world and a lot of European countries who are suffering through this similar, but even not as drastic as problems that we're going through here in Canada. So as soon as I found out about this term, I've always been a big immigration skeptic. That's what drew me into politics in the first place. And as soon as I found out about this term remigration, I knew it was kind of perfect. It was really the way we needed to reframe the immigration discussion in Canada. So I kind of made it my duty to bring this into the Canadian ecosystem throughout the last year. And I think we're going to make it kind of the word of the year this year as the Dominion Society grows and our volunteer infrastructure gets solidified.
Well, it's definitely it's like I was saying prior to starting. There's a question, and it's definitely a little more unique, or we'll say a little more complex when it comes to America and Canada, the new world. I mean, like, what is an American? What is a Canadian? And you're seeing the identical conversation occurring south of the border, and the kind of that dialectic emerged with the H1B visa discussion in America too. And you're seeing this. What you could only describe, Daniel, as a fracture on the right side of politics. Are you seeing this in Canada yourself?
Yeah. I think this is the most important question, especially in Canada. Over the starting in the kind of early 1960s, there was a cultural revolution that was really championed by Trudeau Sr. to transform the identity of Canada into this kind of post-national multicultural state. I believe it was really a reaction to Canada's biculturalism, which they saw as a problem due to Quebec separatism and the tensions that were growing in Canada, especially through the FLQ crisis and things like that. So their solution was to reject Canada's historical bicultural identity and replace it with this multicultural identity, which they thought would be less problematic, but I think it's proven to be much more problematic given the benefit of hindsight. So this is an important question. I think it is actually a much more difficult to pose in the United States versus what we see here in Canada due to the country's different histories. And this is kind of lost. The nuance of the differences between Canada and the United States have really been lost in this kind of post-war period where we've really been captured by the United States as kind of a vassal state, economically, culturally, our prime ministers, starting with Mackenzie King, really posed to push us into the American sphere of influence for short-term economic gain. And that really transformed Canada into something that it never was and was never supposed to be. Canada was, if you look straight into our history, what the founding of Canada, this project was very explicitly a rejection of Americanism, a rejection of this new liberal strain of thought that was coming out of the American foundation. Our founders, the Canadian people, the nation, were very skeptical of both the French and American revolutions, which pushed this new concept of liberalism, which became the kind of status quo around the world in the post-war period as the Americans ascended to the global hegemon, the global superpower. And that affected us more than anyone. Not only were we were kind of a vassal state of the United Kingdom before that, and as the United Kingdom fell throughout the World War and they were replaced by the Americans, who of course have a unique geographic relationship with us, we fell into that sphere of influence, and it transformed Canada into something very different. So to pose the question, what is an American, I think is much more complicated, because inherent to the American ethos is liberalism, is this kind of this kind of identity that's distinct from nationhood, from ethnicity. It's a concept. It's a propositional state. Whereas Canada has always been a rejection of that. Canada's even ethnic demographics upon the foundation were much more narrow than the United States, which has always had a larger proportion of things like Germans and Dutch and Italians and so forth. Canada in 1867 on our founding was 97% Anglo-French, Scottish, Irish, English, French. And the remaining 3% was mostly indigenous. There was a handful of less than 1,000, blacks, Chinese, and stuff like this, which people try and point to as evidence of Canada's multiculturalism. But the reality is, Canada has always been a kind of illiberal rejection of Americanism, rejection of liberalism. Like very much especially the Anglo stock of this country, these are the people that fought against the Yanks during the Revolutionary War, right? They were after that ostracized and moved up, and these are the people that created the founding stock of Ontario, which before that was a string of sparsely populated settlements. These people acted like very explicitly rejected the concepts of Americanism, which have been since adopted, and I think it's a strong betrayal of our ancestors and our founders, that or the fathers of Confederation, that we've kind of strayed from our path. So this question, what is a Canadian? I think it'll really define our generation in upcoming years of politics. It's been completely captured across the political spectrum, right? I don't see the Conservatives as a really distinct different option. I see our choices in Canada in the post-war period are very much between right liberals and left liberals. We have Trudeau going up on stage saying a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. We have Pierre going up on stage saying anyone from anywhere can become Canadian. We say no. Canadians are a distinct people. We're the descendants of the settlers, the explorers, the builders, the pioneers who risked everything to carve Canada out of a hostile wilderness. And while people can come here and integrate into our society, that doesn't make them Canadian, really. Just like it would be for any other country, just like it would be if you immigrated to Iran or Japan or whatnot.
Yeah, I can agree with lots of that to an extent. I think there's a conflation in terms with multiracialism and multiculturalism very frequently. I mean, there were lots of immigration into Canada. I don't dispute the very well established fact that the majority was Irish, Scottish, French, and English being the two biggest groups. But there was, like, right away in 1890, you started to see some of the first waves of Eastern European immigrants in. So I mean, it's complex in the sense of, imagine being someone whose family's been here since, the 1900s. And now when it's trying to be specifically delineated, you find out, well, I'm not considered a Canadian. Like, there's a movement that's trying to erase my aspect from the picture, right?
Yeah, so I think that's really an effective way of summarizing our arguments. I put forward a kind of dual definition here. We have what we call ethnic Canadians, and we have what we call heritage Canadians. So ethnic Canadians are a unique ethnic group. They're a merger of, or two specific ethnic groups actually: Franco Canadians and Anglo Canadians. And Anglo Canadians are the settlers that came here, Irish, English, Scottish, that lived within the St. Lawrence Valley for hundreds of years and underwent an ethnogenesis to form this new unique ethnic group. And it's same for the Franco-Canadians, right? Where even the Franco-Canadians are not a pan-French kind of merging of people, right? They mostly came from northern France, the Normans, and some groups from more central France. So they're also distinctly recognized as a distinct ethnic group. They have their own cultural and linguistic characteristics that find them distinct from European French. So these two groups are what we call ethnic Canadians, but we offer a broader definition as well, heritage Canadians, because as you rightly put, the settlement of Canada didn't end in 1867 when the country was formally confederated. Much of the settlement of northern and western Canada happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when we did start to diversify streams of immigration, mostly from northern and eastern Europe. Now, that diversification is often overstated. The majority of settlers for Western Canada were either coming from Eastern Canada, parts of the United States, and the British Isles. There were groups, Ukrainians, Russians, Dutch, some other groups that started to come over in greater numbers. But it is overstated the way that this diversified our country. And in fact, it really, this spread of Eastern Canadians to the West, and as well as from the British Isles, allowed to create this cultural foundation and extend Canadian culture to the West, to which many of these new ethnic groups could effectively assimilate into. They assimilated into the British institutions towards Canada's unique identity. And so we do extend our definition of heritage Canadians to these later groups of European settlers who effectively integrated into Canadian culture and help settle the country, which I believe is kind of concrete to forming Canadian identity, braving into this the hostile wilderness and carving civilization with our founding people. So I would say that you're oversimplifying what we put forward, because we do offer these kind of dual definitions when we're talking about Canadian identity. I'm really not looking to deport a German who's been in Manitoba or Saskatchewan or whose family has been here for over hundreds of years and helped chop down the trees and build the first buildings and man our political offices for hundreds of years. I believe those people have effectively integrated into Canadian culture. My main concern is more recent waves of immigration, which have radically transformed our demographics. And I would like to point out that people from these European countries do more effectively integrate into Canadian society, whether that be 100 years ago, or whether that be today. They come from more similar countries linguistically, ethnically, culturally, and they integrate more effectively into Canadian society than someone from the Philippines, from India, who come from very different ethnic stock, who come with a very different cultural norms, who come with a completely different language, of religion, and so on. Like conflating a German settler who came to cut down trees and build a house in the middle of nowhere with an Indian who's coming to live in Brampton and continue his ways of life, continue speaking in foreign languages, continue practicing foreign religions, sending back money to his family in another country. Like, these are not the same thing. So I hope that kind of clarifies our position. It's not quite as extreme as you're kind of putting it.
To an extent, and I wasn't making a reductive analysis as a got you. I'm literally trying to ask questions to wrap my head around it. As you pointed out, potentially we do have some misconceptions, but that is at the forefront. I watched some streams you've done where it's like people are trying to figure out their ethnicity. Oh, I'm a half Canadian. You yourself consider yourself a half heritage Canadian. Is that correct?
Yeah. I do consider myself half Canadian. I mean, I think it's important that we put our foot down and are clear about our terms here. But like my father was born in Canada to two immigrant parents. He's not ethnically Canadian in any way. My mother, her family's been here since the 1600s. So I only consider myself half Canadian. And even in these conversations that you're pointing to, I think they come across as pretty obviously ridiculous. Like, these people will say stuff like, my wife is Nigerian, is she Canadian? It's like, no, you literally just said she's Nigerian. Like, what kind of question is this? It doesn't bear any sort of logic. But I think it does kind of correlate with the kind of absurd zeitgeist of our day, where we're so used to these liberal concepts of what it means to be a Canadian that these things are even coming forward as questions, even when they have like answers that are in the questions themselves.
So I'll do a little housekeeping very quickly. We have about 170 people watching. If I could appeal to everyone to please share this. I'm very deboosted in the algorithm. Is as much as seemingly anything that's independent is being. Payman, do you have any comments to add? We've been going for 17 minutes.
Yeah, Daniel, you laid it out pretty well, and thank you. So you mentioned how Canada used to be bicultural, and then Pierre Trudeau, in trying to deal with the FLQ crisis, he kind of tore up that concept of biculturalism, shifted to multiculturalism. And you've also mentioned how Canada is starting to drift towards America. We're in their orbit. I have a question about the FLQ crisis. What is your view on, the precursor to that, the Quiet Revolution, and then the FLQ crisis? Like, how do you view those events?
I'm not super up to date on the entire history and ideology behind the FLQ crisis. I don't agree with violent solutions for political problems. Personally, I do believe in peaceful solutions to these kind of issues, and that's why we're going about things like we are, not putting on masks and putting politicians in the backs of trucks. Now, I do think that there are positives and negatives to the Quiet Revolution, which, broadly speaking, was the secularization of Quebec. I do think the secularization of Canadian society has been largely problematic overall in Quebec and otherwise. I think it's eroded the kind of collective bonds, especially at a local level, of Canadians, which has created or precipitated a lot of these political problems that we have. Heritage Canadians acting as atomized individuals within our political system has made us very easy to ignore, especially as we've diversified Canada through mass immigration and allowed for these kind of ethnic blocs who come from countries where collective thought is much more the norm. And who bring that here and act as kind of collective voting blocks to act within the best interest of their kind of ethnicity within our borders. So now we have a very disorganized, atomized base of heritage Canadians competing against an organized collectives of foreign groups who are generally organized through their religious hubs, their churches, their synagogues, their gurdwaras, whatnot. So I do see the secularization of Canadian society as a major problem, but the bigger problems to me are more the liberalization of Canadian society and our kind of adoption of American philosophies and ways of doing things, governing that aren't in line with our history. I very much see Canadians as kind of liberal hardware running liberal software. And I think that explains a lot of the problems in Canadian society. And even a lot of like more recent developments, like people like the Liberal Party has acted very illiberally in a number of ways, whether that be through the COVID crisis or some of their new gun legislations or censorship bills that they put forward. But while these might be unpopular with people on the right, a lot of the criticisms fall on deaf ears because people try and push back through a liberal lens, which ultimately does not resonate with Canadians, because whether or not even though we've been kind of captured by liberal thought, even though we've been captured by American institutions. There's still kind of an instinct, an illiberal instinct within the Canadian ethos, which is apprehensive of kind of liberal commentary in general.
I think liberal is one of the words that has been most grossly distorted in the modern era, for what it means. It's a lot of people use it to define illiberal behavior, especially in Canada with the conflation of the two major parties being named after the philosophy. Everything the Liberal Party in Canada is doing is by definition very illiberal presently. So I mean, it's illiberal in one direction, but it's still illiberal.
It is and it isn't. Like, as I said, I qualify them as left liberals and right liberals. So I mean, even things like DEI policy, for example, which some right liberals might put forward as illiberal policy, left liberals see it as an evening of the playing field to allow for more liberal outcomes. They think that the right liberal commentary would be, we need to treat all people equally. We shouldn't be giving money to one group. We shouldn't be giving preferential hiring to one group and not others. That would be the right liberal perspective. The left liberal perspective would be a more like equality of outcomes kind of perspective, where adjustments are needed to create fairness. See, I come from a completely, what I would say, an authentically right-wing perspective, which is to say, exclusionary, hierarchical, and nationalist, not this argument, which I believe is fundamentally left wing, which is how do we achieve egalitarian outcomes?
So when you look at everything presently in the West, and I'm asking you to look a little more broadly now, you kind of equate it all to failures ultimately of liberalism. Like even the weaponized mass migration into Canada, that's just a failure of a liberal ideal, like the end consequence of liberalism.
Yeah. I think that's an expected outcome of a liberal outlook on or worldview or concept. Very much like the post-war period is defined by liberalism winning the day. That's the post-war consensus that people point to, right? We need to have a rules-based liberal international order to govern things, because if not, we'll have some tyrants genociding people or whatnot. We can't have a national identity. We can't have pride in our history, our heritage, our nation, our race. We can't have any of this, or else it'll obviously result in the extermination of certain groups or whatnot. And I kind of reject this idea. I reject the liberal post-war consensus, and I believe that we need to have a certain level of collective thought in order to do what's best for our nation, our country, our people, as opposed to viewing things from this liberal perspective. Ultimately, this individualist, this liberal perspective, if you take it to its logical end, it's going to start to see people as individuals, as economic units, as interchangeable. And I reject that worldview. I do think that Canadians are fundamentally different from Indians, from Chinese people, from Africans, and so on. And it's not like you can't just plug and play people, and it's just a matter of giving people DEI hiring practices or extra investments or whatnot in order to level that paying field. Like, there are differences between people and groups, especially, and we need to kind of be pragmatic about that instead of trying to kind of play God and shift people into different things. We need to have some level of collective thought and do things for the best of our nation. So I mean, I think the liberal worldview is going to see people as individuals, as economic units, and bringing people in to increase GDP. Like, this is logical from the liberal perspective. It's completely illogical from a more nationalist or illiberal perspective, where obviously we need to maintain this country for our own people and do what's best for our nation.
I mean, my comprehension of what's occurring in the West, and I seen it first in Europe, and I seen it in Canada and America slightly thereafter, is this forced migration, which in essence is kind of illiberal if it's not up to the people. I don't remember voting for the mass migration to occur. So I mean, it's when I look at it, I can't say, and I won't even say I don't think liberalism had a chance to fail. I think there's larger externalities that are pushing these policies. And what I would say to lend credence to that assertion is the fact that it's occurring absolutely everywhere in the West, despite their unique histories. It's like we're seeing this. It seems like it's it's an external force that is pushing it this way.
Yeah, so I would say it's happening everywhere because the kind of incentives are the same everywhere. So I would say people like to, like, we do talk about things like the Great Replacement, which people like to kind of claim as some sort of conspiracy theory. They like to reduce it to
I accept it entirely. It's very obvious at this point. 100%.
It's very obvious at this point. Because they like to kind of reduce it to something like Jews in smoky rooms kind of controlling the world and like trying to make it absurd like that. The reality is, like, there are people that mass migration benefits, and there's kind of three main driving forces behind this. There's the political elites benefit from bringing over blocks of supporters that are then loyal to the party that they can buy votes from by promising to bring more immigrants here for their family members and whatnot. There's the political incentive. There's the economic incentive. There's massive business interests that benefit from mass migration by depressing wages, by increasing asset prices. There are these concrete economic interests. And the third is this very ideological post-national vision who looks back on the history of Canada and Western countries generally as evil, as colonialist, and sees migration as a way to make up for our terrible, evil past and to destroy and erase our identity, which they think is problematic. So it's like these three kind of driving forces, which you can map onto every single country, as every single Western country, at least, as the kind of driving logic behind mass migration. So
that's actually
like shadowy cabal. I think it's the obvious incentive structures that affect every country.
I definitely think there's a shadowy cabal, but that's besides the point. There's a lot to do with the terminology too. Like what exists, it's a concept called conceptual polysemy. When you hear people utilize words, it's almost weaponized them. You see this on what we would refer to as the left in Canada. When you've mentioned DEI, like diversity, for instance, that doesn't mean anyone is welcome in some egalitarian sense. It quite specifically means absence of the perceived racial hegemon. So when that's used in a Western context, that means absent white people. And that ties in with a lot of the anti-white rhetoric. And what you were mentioning about the colonialistic Western culture is bad, that's actually an outgrowth of Rousseauianism. That's like the noble savage. There's something inherently wrong with Western man by its very nature. And that was popularized far before liberalism. But back to the broader issue. When I heard you speaking on some shows recently, and you mentioned the term ethnogenesis, and that's getting back into the racial Canadian or an ethnic Canadian. Now, I could see where you're going with that, but like in my conception, and a lot of other people too, I'm playing devil's advocate to an extent here, but how long does it take for an where a unique ethnic group is kind of emerges? Like, because I would posit that if we plucked your average white American and your average white Canadian and we analyzed their genetics, they would be virtually indistinguishable.
No. That depends where you're plucking people from. Perhaps if you're plucking someone from Nova Scotia and then just south of the border, there's definitely common ties there. But the American demographics are quite different historically than the Canadians, although there are some overlapping ties, especially in the very, very early history. We've been here for hundreds of years. People have been on this continent since the 1600s. Intermarrying has been happening over this period. That's how an ethnogenesis happens. I have a nice little dog. His name's Arthur. He's a Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever, a uniquely Canadian breed. They're a mix of all sorts of different setter and pointer breeds, retriever breeds to make a uniquely Canadian purebred dog. That's emerged in the last few hundred years. I don't see why we can recognize purebred dogs and not purebred Canadians.
Okay, I would argue with Canada, what we've seen was more a cultural genesis. But I grasp your argument, man. And here's the thing about these arguments and the complexity of these questions presently. I agree with you when you say this generation is going to be determining this, but there's no easy answer and there's no clear way to quantify such things. I mean, you have it framed in history, oh, well, we're a mix of these specific cultures, but that's not exactly a quantification because there's a lot of Canadians that would differ and have an entirely different opinion. And kind of what is how do we quantify? I think this is going to be answered in the coming years for sure, because it's at the forefront of national discourse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Like there are like we have these kind of ethnic Canadians, as I've already put it, that share ethnic similarities, and then we have this further group, heritage Canadians, where there is more some degrees of ethnic differences, although there is still significant overlap. Many of these people will be like, I'm a quarter English, a quarter Scottish, and half German or something like this. So there is like significant overlap with what we'd say are the ethnic Canadians. But especially in Eastern Canada, the ethnic groups are rather tight, as we've already kind of discussed. And more broadly, I think that ultimately, like liberal commentary on immigration, people often put forward, like, why don't you just focus on the economic side of things? Like if you just focused on that, you'd have more support from immigrants. You'd have there would be less controversy, so on and so forth. But ultimately, I don't think that it gets to the root of the issue. And really, I think the problem with mass immigration is not just that it's overburdening our hospitals, that it's driving up housing costs, that it's driving down wages, although obviously all these things are problematic. The biggest problem is that it's transforming our country into something that it isn't and never should have been. We do have a fascinating history that I'm incredibly proud of, a unique heritage that I think needs to be maintained. And ultimately, you can't separate the ethnos from the ethos. You can't. These things are intimately tied together, and we see that as we've transformed Canada with immigration from more radically different ethnicities and more radically different countries, and how that changes things. So I think we need to approach things from a more kind of illiberal, a more exclusionary perspective in order to truly solve the crisis that's been going on. And while it's been kicked into overdrive in the last 10 years under Justin Trudeau, like this is a problem that I see has been really going on since the early 1980s and Brian Mulroney, when we shifted from this kind of tap on, tap off style of immigration that kind of worked with our kind of economic situation of the day towards this flat figure where we've just seen it increase over the years. And then, starting in the early 2000s, when these streams of immigration started coming from more radically different cultures under Stephen Harper, where things like China and Philippines and India became the major sources of migration. So I think if we need to have an open discussion about culture, about identity, and about how those things intertwine with things like ethnicity and race.
I definitely think it's undeniable. Like we were very largely homogenous white European country. It's kind of ironic because that's why a lot of the immigrant groups that came here from more diverse places ethnically came. They came to be a majority white.
In 1991, we were 88% white. We were 70% Anglo-French, and since then, things have transformed. And we're talking about
it's radical.
Exactly. We're talking about the span of less than 30 years, this radical transformation. And I think it needs to be reversed. And I think our politics allows for that change to happen. Just like politicians used policy changes to bring these people here, we can adjust the same policies to send them back.
I agree with that. Honestly, I think it's a necessity, and I agree. Like we obviously know the weaponized mass migration has economic implications. It stagnates wages. It's driven up and inflated various aspects and sectors in our economy, housing prices and rental rates and all of that. But I agree with you, sir. It's very obvious. It's the dilution of what a Canadian is that's been the biggest problem, and the balkanization of our electorate. And like you've pointed out, and I really think that's the best, one of the not the best, but potentially one of the better points you guys are making is like there's large voting blocks that are voting together to ensure things are being done for them. That's why we're seeing our politicians dress up in cultural garb and pushing things that way. That's quite evident. Another thing, I entirely agree. This has to be reversed. The things you and I disagree on are more philosophical and more nuanced, and we could talk about it all day and not get this clear, defined answer. But I mean, at the end of the day, and it's like I said, even on the episode where we were being critical, it's like I view you and your organization as an ally. I mean, I don't want to be adversarial despite our disagreements. And this is a common theme with most of my discourse. I really think we have to start to focus more on things that unite us in a common cause as opposed to divide us, or we truly will fall. Would you have anything
Really,
to add? Sorry, go ahead.
Really, my strategy around the Dominion Society it is to focus very narrowly on the issue of immigration and specifically on remigration. So we have a bundle of policies that we believe that are the solution to the mass immigration crisis. And we don't want to get into these arguments about, economics and climate change and all these other issues. I have my own personal opinions on all these things, but really our kind of strategy is to build this broad coalition around the concept of remigration and start channeling that into things like localized groups, because as you just were saying, that's the big example, the big advantage that a lot of these foreign ethnic groups have. A lot of it is these community groups, these ethnic special interest groups, or mostly around faith groups, which are invariably localized. Our immigration system has encouraged these people to cluster into certain areas. Obviously, there's examples like Surrey and Brampton and Northern Calgary and stuff like this, but it maps very problematically onto our electoral process. People, especially older people, have this concept of immigration where you just have maybe you have a small town and there's one Chinese family and they run the Chinese restaurant, and one group there's one Persian guy who's a doctor, and that's their concept of what immigration looks like.
That's how it used to be, though, Daniel. Yeah. Honestly, like I'm 42. That's what it was like growing up in Eastern Canada.
I know.
Not in the main cities, but that's how it was in my town.
So but it's not like that anymore.
That's for sure.
Now we have full areas, and the way that works with our electoral system is you have complete ridings that are dominated by them. So now there's a huge electoral incentive for politicians to start pandering in all sorts of different ways. So I want to create that counterbalance amongst Heritage Canadians. I want to create these localized groups and create that pressure electorally so that politicians have to start pandering back to actual Canadians rather than immigrants first and second generation and so on. So that's kind of the logic that we see how the game is being played, and we want to start using it to our advantage, just like the foreigners are kind of using it to theirs.
It's reasonable. Do you have anything to add, Payman? I feel like I'm excluding you from the conversation. Me and Daniel are going back and forth. I have so many questions.
I hear what you're trying to say, Daniel, and you're describing like it's not even immigration at this point. It's a diaspora. It's people that are, even if they're here for generations, they're not really integrating. And I almost feel for you because you're going to people. You're like, guys, like what I'm saying is not radical. Like this is about observation. I'm 41. I remember, you go to England, you got Englishmen. You go to French, you got Frenchmen. You got Germans in Germany. You have this thing called Chinese. You have this thing called Russians. You have this thing called Iranians. And Russians and Iranians have multiple ethnicities. But it's some, even if you can't define it, you know what it is. But you, Daniel, when you say this, you get called a white supremacist. And I hear what you're saying that it started all with...
But like I've watched you talk about us a couple of times, Payman, and you keep kind of framing us like we're having a hard time, and we're really not. Like, yes, there's going to be pushback. We're working against generations, decades of programming, but overwhelmingly, the feedback that I get is this is a breath of fresh air. I've been waiting for someone to finally articulate the way I've been feeling my entire life. We're blowing up, right? Like I started this thing just 5 months ago, and we started from zero. We started from scratch. I posted a video on a Twitter account with 0 followers, and it got 250,000 views. And we've accrued 2,000 members across the country, representing every single province and territory across the country. This is from scratch. Like it's not like the PPC. I'm not Maxime Bernier coming off of a huge narrow electoral defeat within the biggest party in the country with a huge platform and media coverage. I've gotten very little media coverage. I'm not a notable person. I'm just a guy that's posting on social media and trying to get people organized online. We're exploding incredibly fast. I have more than 30,000 followers on Facebook, 26,000 on Instagram, 22,000 on Twitter. We're blowing up incredibly fast because we have a strong message that's historically accurate, that answers the problems that we're seeing in society. Yes, I have the Canadian Anti-Hate Network nipping at my heels. I have some brainwashed liberals that think it's racist or hateful to even bring up concepts of race, despite, the Trudeau, the Carney government announcing $200 million to Black-owned businesses, like despite racism being the
Daniel,
part of the core of Canadian
my
society.
My question is that you mentioned the brainwashed liberals. What's your strategy, your tactics for putting the genie back in the bottle? Because you have all of these brainwashed liberals in the urban centers that grew up on generations of multiculturalism. And now those same brainwashed liberals brought in all of these immigrants. Like, what is your 10-point plan? I know you have like this all over your website. If you could explain it for the audience.
Well, I mean, we have a 10-point remigration plan. The thing is, it's the liberals themselves that are that are their own undoing, right? They've pushed the envelope too far. They've brought people here in such numbers that assimilation was not possible, that our economy is collapsing, that people are struggling. And now even people who were very liberal 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago are grappling with the obvious reality that people are different, that Indians and Chinese people, they come here and they don't have any reason to integrate into society. They have different cultural norms and so on, and they can't just become Canadian. Now this lie that has been being put forward for 40, 50 years is just so obviously untrue that people are becoming more open-minded. And when they see someone like me come forward with a clear, articulate, historically grounded notion of our identity and a cohesive, clear plan on how we can politically change this through developing an organization and pushing for specific policy transformations under this umbrella of remigration, they're coming in. Like there's so many people out here that are liberal by default because they don't invest very much time in politics. Like they're not reading books, they're doing their jobs and so on, that are just waking up because the situation in Canada is becoming untenable. And once the solutions are provided, whether that be organizationally or policy wise, they're excited to get involved and help us push things forward. So I think we're putting things forward at the right time, in the right way. And that's why things are going to shift so quickly. We started from zero just 5 months ago, and just wait to see where we'll be at our 1-year mark this summer.
Can I ask a follow-up question, JP?
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
Daniel, I'm asking these questions to explain better for the audience what the Dominion Society is. Is your goal is to change the culture to make it acceptable to talk about remigration so that the people will put pressure on the politicians to put forth your remigration policy? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a good summary. I'm of the belief, like we use a kind of metapolitical strategy. We're borrowing from actually neo-Marxist thought, the strategies of Antonio Gramsci that kind of have that put forward that politics is downstream from culture, and thus the best way to change politics is to change culture. And this is very much how this liberal revolution happened, right? It happened through the universities, it happened through popular media, and thus the electorate was set in a way where political parties, they're not really set up to be thought leaders. They exist to capitalize on popular sentiment, and thus as culture transforms, inevitably political parties will transform. So we want to take those exact same tactics, but use it to normalize remigration and nationalism as a kind of comprehensive worldview. So we do this through kind of four main pathways. We have our media content. We have our grassroots organization, who are going to be engaging in all sorts of grassroots politics, distributing flyers, putting up posters, knocking on doors, protests, demonstrations, that sort of stuff. We have our kind of intellectual wing, our kind of think tank style, our policy plan, which is going to be developed into a series of white papers, which are going to be distributed to the media and institutions, governments, parties, all that sort of thing. And finally, we're looking to what I call institutional infiltration. We're looking to, as we develop our network across the country, we're looking to take over electoral district associations within all political parties. We're looking to take over local boards and community groups. We're going to have Canadian nationalists taking over every institution around this country. So we have a very ambitious and clear plan. We have a very a set of clear tactics, and ultimately, like at the most basic level, what we're doing is promoting our worldview, our ideas, and building an organization based off of that. And once we have a national network of nationalists that are credible and professional and singing from the same song sheet, will be very, very powerful. And if our metapolitical tactics ultimately fail, if you have politicians, talking the talk but not walking the walk, we'll be in a very strong position to start our own political party if that is necessary. That's not going to suffer from some of the same issues that parties like the People's Party of Canada and the United Party of Canada and all these kind of small upstart parties that have just not gone anywhere suffer from, because we'll already have that pre-existing network of people, that pre-existing brand, and so on, local leaders, the kind of foundation of what a political party needs to succeed in the short term.
I was unaware that it was Gramsci that quote was attributed to. I've heard that a lot. I agree with it. Politics are quite obviously downstream of culture. But it's funny, you kind of mentioned that like liberalism was through academia, and it's like kind of neo-Marxism was through that. That's like you get into Marcusean critical theory. It was captured by a certain ethos, and that's kind of broadly affecting our societies now. That's where the DEI stuff comes from, right? But yeah, that was, we usually run for about an hour. So if it's all right with you, Daniel, I'd like to take some questions. Is that all right with you?
I'm along for the ride, boys. Whatever you want from me, I'm here to dance.
Excellent, man. I got to say again too, I do respect you coming on. It shows a lot. So many people are ready to make their assertions, but they don't want any scrutiny, and that's like not where we are. Like, this whole excluding certain viewpoints from the discourse is one of the most detrimental effects that's happening in politics in Canada presently, in my estimation.
Yeah, that's one thing I do want to accomplish. I want to be an effective spokesperson for the nationalist movement. I think there has been this growing movement kind of bubbling, especially on the online right, especially on Twitter, where free speech is more allowed, but it's very nebulous. There's a lot of anons and so on, and a lot of people need an actual face and an actual kind of leader to get behind. So I want to be that kind of spokesperson for this broader movement that can explain our ideas in a clear and articulate way, so we can continue to grow. Because I think there's a lot of kind of more normies out there that need that in order to get behind it. So I'm happy to take on arguments, debates, and so on. I don't think there's anyone that's bold enough to debate me in this scene yet. They just kind of snipe at my heels on Twitter and get ratioed. But I'm open to all sorts of interviews and debates and so on. I love talking about my ideas. It's a passion of mine.
Yeah, I mean, I would have no problem debating you on a given topic formally. I would actually like to regarding some of your views regarding liberalism. But that's not what I'm here for. I agree with you on a lot. I really do. Number one, and primarily, it's we have to reverse this mass migration. This has to be done. This has to take a precedence 100%. Another thing I'd say is right up there is we have to ensure the integrity of our institutions. Now, you view it a little differently, but I feel like we've been captured. There's institutional capture by large corporate and banking interests that are pushing policies in our country. The House of Commons was traditionally a place for common people to have representational government. And we still have representational government, but I don't feel they're representing their constituents.
Well, I mean, as much a problem as that is they are representing their constituents, and but their constituents are foreigners.
That's a good point.
You have Indians representing Indian interests in a riding filled with Indians. Like, I don't know what to expect at this point. Now you have, dudes wearing turbans in the Saskatchewan legislature putting forward how we need, Sikh Remembrance Day or whatever, Sikh Heritage Month. When the history of Sikhs in Saskatchewan goes back like 30 years. Like, what heritage?
I think it's relative. There was one wave of Sikh immigrants that came in 1908 and that they were all males and they stayed. I read a little bit about that. I'm not sure if that's what it was referencing.
I can't remember it off the top of my head. I have a thread or a tweet about this from when that came up, but it is a very shallow history. Definitely doesn't need a significant recognition.
I concur entirely. So we have Nick Monk 1098 here. I hear exactly the same on podcasts from the UK. There are parts of London that were 97% white in 1960 and are 37% white now. A huge change in 60 years. That's the radical demographic shifts we're seeing. And if you read anything about history, even American history, like some of the Great Migration, the Northern Migration from a lot of the poor Southerners up north, that causes like some of the worst civil unrest that we can have domestically. And I think that's the position we're in Canada now. I think relative to the radical demographic change, you're going to see a lot of civil unrest.
Yeah, I mean, there has never been a society that hasn't undergone strife through multiculturalism, through migration patterns. Like, this is how empires die, right? They try and extend themselves and include new groups and stuff as they conquer them, and then everything just falls apart. So I think it's hubris to expect things are different, and it comes from this very liberal worldview that they think everyone can be the same and everyone can be equal and we're all the same behind a Rawlsian veil of ignorance or whatnot. But anyone that has eyes and trusts their lying eyes can see that there are obviously differences between people and groups, and that creates tensions. And not to mention, we're importing foreign conflicts, foreign blood feuds that have been going on for hundreds of years. One of the most problematic parts of Indian migration to Canada is not only the significant numbers that they're coming in, but that they're coming in more equal numbers between Hindus and Sikhs, which obviously have their own tensions. And now we see, last summer we saw, Hindus and Sikhs fighting in the streets in Brampton and walking up on each other's temples of faith to tear them down or whatnot. All of the biggest kind of political demonstrations we see in Canada nowadays are about foreign issues. They're about foreign wars, whether that be Israel-Palestine stuff or what's going on. Some farmers protest in India. At the end of last year, there was 50,000 Sikhs that came into Ottawa to vote in a referendum about Khalistani independence. What the heck is that? I don't even know what they're advocating for. Do they want to start a Sikh ethno-state here in Canada, back home? What purpose does a referendum here in Canada have on any of that? But the reality is 50,000 people descending on Ottawa from all over the country to vote in this referendum. What kind of actual Canadian group does stuff like that? I don't even know if there's like 50,000 people who come in for like the Strong and Free conference, the Manning conference, the biggest conservative conference in Ottawa each year, like mobilizing people in terms of politics. It's all about foreign issues now. And I think that's very reductive to our politics overall.
I think it's definitely detrimental. But yeah, I think nothing makes Canadians realize that there's been a problem more than watching foreign conflicts being sorted out in their city streets. I think that's one of the biggest things that makes people realize, like, okay, there's a problem. But one of the issues you mentioned, it's like we're seeing how different people are now relative to the pace of this, right? Like before, when we mentioned, like in small towns, you'd have a Chinese family, but that Chinese family would acclimate. There were no other Chinese diaspora to have a unique ethnic community with. And we've seen that be eradicated with the sheer pace and the volume, which again is one of the biggest things you're seeing everywhere. So we have Granddaddy O.
You have to have a clear supermajority to be that foundational culture to integrate into. Now we're rapidly becoming a minority in our own country, and government policy is official multiculturalism. It is pushing them to keep their foreign languages and cultures and so on. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, unless your strategy is to balkanize Canada and to destabilize within the electorate. So we have Granddaddy O here. Yeah, Dominion is not a political party. Its only real purpose, in my opinion, is induction of the ideation to shift acceptable table discourse and narrative. So that's relative to the vanguard aspect of your movement. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, he's totally correct. Our concept is metapolitics. We're not a political party. Our main purpose is to popularize this concept of remigration and push it into the mainstream discussion. The reality is, conversations about remigration is never going to be embraced as a political solution until people know what it is. We need to destigmatize conversations on mass migration, on identity, in order to make them more mainstream. And I think we've seen that, especially over the last year. But now we need to continue to push the envelope. There is this kind of consensus in Canada that yes, mass migration is a problem, but in terms of solutions, it's kind of like we just kind of have to deal with it. We have to reduce the numbers. It's gone too far, but we go a step further. Like, politicians brought them here. Politicians can send them back. Remigration is the real solution to the mass migration crisis. So our main purpose is to popularize this concept, to popularize this kind of way of thinking, this nationalist worldview. And as that becomes more and more popular, we'll see political parties adopt that. But yeah, that's our kind of view on metapolitics.
Okay, so we have Gary Halaki here. The imaginary country of Khalistan has an embassy in BC. Is that true? That's true?
I don't know.
Okay, he's a joker. He's a funny guy. I can't imagine that being the state. So we'll take one more here. We have Clown World. Last summer, we saw some group of Indians walking onto Parliament Hill wearing swords, walking right past the Parliament Police Service. How can anyone not question that?
Yeah. The double standard too. Like there's freedom protesters that have their flags taken away from them going on to Canadian flags and a hockey stick going on to Parliament Hill. No, that could be a weapon, but Sikhs going up with banners and swords and flags. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Give them their time. I don't understand the double standard at all.
So, Payman, do you have anything to add? Any questions?
I hate that I have to ask this, but how are you going to deal with the demographic issue? I mean, our birth rate is like 1.6. It's like a suicidal country.
Yeah. And that's the same about amongst all sorts of countries across the world at this kind of stage of development. So one, this is often overrated as an issue. There was a study released by Cornell University over the summer that showed that countries with stagnating and even dropping populations are actually some of the most successful across a whole slew of metrics. They had ranging from corruption to economic productivity and so on. So even flagging this as like a central problem compared to mass migration and the erosion of Canadian identity is completely out of whack. It's a bit of a red herring. That being said, I do think remigration itself will have a bunch of positive impacts in order to increase the birth rate. Things like pride in our identity and culture, reduction in housing costs, increase in wages and job opportunities. These are all downstream effects of remigration and will create the kind of foundational set of incentives to allow for family creation and even younger families. But as well, we are considering developing a kind of parallel plank a similar plan to what we have for remigration in terms of pronatalism, and adopting a lot of ideas from some European countries and throughout history in order to incentivize fertility and address the fertility crisis, increase domestic birth rate amongst heritage Canadians. But right now we're very narrowly focused on remigration. We haven't had the time to add to our platform, but I do think it would be complementary to our ideas, because it is kind of a logical conclusion. If we're not increasing our population by immigration, how are we increasing our population? I mean, infinite growth is a bit of a red herring and kind of an elite manufactured lie. But that's my perspective.
I think natalism is an absolute necessity in Western countries presently. You've seen Viktor Orban do this in Hungary. It has been done historically, not by some great people, but I mean, it was effective in regards to what it was endeavoring to accomplish. But I mean,
there are some good ideas out there. We can
you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's right. But yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand, as that's their big argument. Well, we need to support the aging population, so we have to have unfettered immigration in order to accomplish that. But the way to do that without even stressing out the infrastructure would have been to incentivize natalist policies 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when we started to notice the demographic trends. But that's about enough for us for today. I really want to thank you, Daniel, for coming on to speak with me. We'd like to have some discussions in the future potentially as well, if you're up for that.
Yeah, I'm always down. You know how to reach me.
Excellent, man. Do you have any parting thoughts, Payman?
Godspeed, Daniel. You got your work cut out for you. You got to reverse the generations of multiculturalism.
And
I appreciate it.
Before we go, Daniel, I'd like to give you an opportunity to let my audience know where they could find you and your organization.
Yeah. I mean, all the standard. Please take some time to follow me on Twitter. My handle's right there at the bottom as well. You should check us out, the Dominion Society, across social media. You can find us anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X. We're not on TikTok anymore because we got banned a few months ago. So you can find us anywhere at Dominion Soc, SOC. You should also check out our website, dominionsociety.ca. You can find some more on our ideas. We didn't even get into our full remigration plan today, so you can find our 10-point kind of breakdown of policy proposals that we put forward to actually achieve remigration. And if you like what you hear today, please consider making a small donation to help us grow and join and push our vision forward, or even become a member. If you're looking to get involved in our organization as a volunteer at the local level, we'll be building kind of localized chapters throughout this year to put forward our message in cities and towns across the country. So if you're interested in getting involved, head over to our website and sign up there. It's $25 a year. That helps us run the organization. You get a nice little membership card and a nice pin, and you can help us push forward our vision across the country.
Awesome.
But thanks for having me on. It was a fun discussion. I always love talking about these ideas in Canadian nationalism.
Thanks again for coming, man. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for watching. And if I can appeal one more time to get people to share the stream, we derive the majority of our views after the live broadcast, so it's still very advantageous. Thank you guys for checking it out, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye, guys. Bye, Daniel.